Hi folks, welcome to Developers Let's Code. My name is Derek Bingham. I'm a developer advocate at AWS, and over the next hour I'm going to take you through how to build a nice little React app using AWS Amplify. So this is a follow-up from last week's show where we had Gabe talk to us about how to host static websites using Amplify. This is almost a part two of that, where we're talking about the Amplify framework and how we can use that. Unfortunately, Gabe, who was supposed to give this talk, is sick. So if you're watching Gabe, hope you're feeling better soon. However, if I'm wearing a hat in your honor, if people who know Gabe, they know that he presents with a hat. So this is my ode to you. I hope you're feeling better soon. So what we're going to do over the next hour, we're going to build this little app, and I've got a diagram here up to over my shoulder here of what we're going to build. So we're going to we're going to start off by creating authentication authorization layer for our application. Then we're going to go in and add an API. We're going to add a persistence layer into DynamoDB. And then we're going to add a little AI component, and we're going to do that using AWS Amplify. So that's a little bit of an introduction. I'm actually in Perth, so in Western Australia. So if you're on the chat, please shout out and say where you are. Let me know you're there. Let me know you're live. Ask me any questions. I'm very excited to be here today because I love Amplify. It's my favorite AWS service. I've done a lot of talks around it and in demos, and I'm pretty excited to be doing this today. So we'll jump in to our development environment first, and I'll describe that to you. Hi, Acorns, hi, Brads, from Melbourne, and another Apple one sec from Melbourne. Hi, hope you feel okay, feeling good. So let's go. I can just bring up my ID. OBS works for me. Okay, so this is the ID I'll be using for today. It is Cloud9. So this is for people who are not familiar with Cloud9, you can actually spin it up inside your AWS account. So I've created a little environment here called Amplify. Why did I do this? Why am I using Cloud9? Because it's easy to configure for me. It comes pre-installed with Node, the AWS CLI, and Docker as well. Interestingly enough, if you want to use Docker, so it's really handy to use. So I'm using that. And what I've done in this environment, I have just installed Create React App. So those of us who have developed in React before are familiar with it. But if you're not, the Create React App is simply a scaffolding for a React application. So I have created a little scaffold of an application. Here it is here. It's called Notes app. And the Notes app itself is running at the minute. So I've got it running so we can actually preview what it's like. So if we preview that running application, it comes up here, and there is what a Create React app, your first step into React developing. This is what it'll look like. And I can also, change that URL. So we're not learning React today, we're learning Amplify. So I save that and it'll just re-render. And today we're learning Amplify. So for those of us, if you missed the last session, Amplify itself is a service from AWS. So, and the best place to start learning about Amplify is the Amplify documentation. So here we are at the Amplify documentation. Oh, Mexico, Montreal, fantastic. Hi everybody, Big Siri, Acorns MX, awesome. So here in the Amplify documentation, I think Gabe last week took you through this, but what Amplify is, and I'll go through this in a bit more detail, but it's a framework of components and libraries. But last week what we did, we looked at the static web hosting component. So if you missed that episode, check it out. It'll be on the AWS Twitch stream. Check it out. It's very cool how you can host a static website. This one, we're going to be concentrating on the Amplify framework and what that is. So let's do a quick overview of what Amplify is. So today we're going to use not only React, so I've showed you the create React template and scaffold that I've created. We're going to add some Amplify components to it, what we call categories, and then we're going to run all of those on AWS Cloud. So what we're going to add, we're going to go authentication, we're going to add database, we're going to add search as well to our application. We're going to add some AI, and we're going to host it all in the cloud. This is the application. I went through it before. I'm not going to dwell too long on PowerPoints. It's not my style. But what I want to do is just give you a quick overview of Amplify, because it's many parts. So when people talk about Amplify to me, I talk to customers a lot about Amplify. And what they say, that there's always a confusion around, oh, is it Amplify? What part of it is it? Is it Amplify console? Is it Amplify CLI? So this is what the different components of Amplify are, and I'll just quickly give you how I understand them and how I talk about them. So the first part of the Amplify tool set and framework is the CLI. So the CLI is there to start thinking about how you're going to provision services in Amplify. And I'll show you it in a little bit, but it's like the AWS CLI, the SAM CLI. If you used it, it's got a number of commands that you use, and you can, that's how you get started. Then you've got client libraries. So we've got a number of client libraries that you can add to native iOS app, Android app, JavaScript frameworks. New Zealand as well. Hi. And JavaScript frameworks. We've got React as well as React. We have got a number of other JavaScript frameworks, which I've had a mind blank at the minute. Look up documentation if you forgot. And then also is the client library. So the client libraries are used to almost the API to the backend services. So if, say, you provision a RESTful API, the client libraries for the platform you're developing in, you can then use to communicate with that API. So then we've got also reusable UI components. So the UI components we can pull in and is pre-existing components, and without writing much code, we can start implementing them in our application. Then, as well as those, and they're all open source, by the way, as well as those, we've got a console. We can add CI/CD, and Gabe showed that in operation last week. I'm not going to go into that this week. And also we have device form, which is a way of testing your applications on different devices and sizes and shapes. So that's it in a nutshell. We have a number of different categories. So this is what I'm going to do today. I'm going to add different categories to this application. So the three I'm going to choose today are predictions, which is an AI ML category, API, so I'm going to add a GraphQL API, and I'm also going to add auth and auth. So the first thing I'm going to do is add auth. So if I go back into my Cloud9, I've got a running application, but I want to create a new terminal. So I will keep the application running at all times, and I'll just run away there. But in this terminal, I just want to get started. Okay. So the first thing I need to do, I need to initialize my application. So I mentioned earlier the Amplify CLI. So it's installed already. And if I put it in, you've got all the different commands. What I love about the Amplify CLI is and it doesn't come up really well there, but the ASCII code and the ASCII pics for Amplify CLI are awesome. So that's just, I just like it because ASCII is a hard thing to draw in. So the first thing I need to do is to cd into my my Notes app. And what I do is I run the initial command, which initializes my project, which is called Amplify init. So I'm going to go with defaults for the majority of these. So I'm going to call it Notes app. The development, the environment I'm going to specify is dev. So an environment specifies what I'm going to name my backend. So in this case, we're developing, so I'm going to call it dev. Also, we can choose our editor. So at the minute, I'm using Cloud9, as I said. So I'm going to choose none, but as you can see, there's a number of well-used editors there. You can choose if you're building out your Amplify project. And then what am I going to build it in? So for this one, I'm going to use React, which is a JavaScript library. And it'll actually introspect the code already, and it'll tell me you're using React, which is pretty cool. So I'll choose it. Keep the defaults, and CloudFormation is the provider. So what this will now do, it will start to. So this is the profile. So if you've used AWS before, you'll notice when you set up your CLI, you set up profiles. So profiles are how you connect into your AWS account. Here I only have one, so I'm selecting it and it's default. And so what this does, so this command init is actually initializing in the background the authorization for my Amplify project. It's setting up an S3 bucket, because what Amplify does, it generates CloudFormation. And I'll show you that a little bit later, but it generates CloudFormation, so it needs an S3 bucket to upload the CloudFormation to, so it can then provision the services. So that's what it's doing now. And it usually doesn't take too long to initialize a project. So that's it done, which is cool. So that's our project initialized. So if we jump back in, there it is. Let me know if sound, vision's all right, everybody in the chat. Please ask questions. I can literally talk about Amplify for days, so it'd be good if you could, keep me focused. So the one thing that I usually do when I start off a new Amplify dev, I do Amplify status. So what Amplify status does, it tells me what categories I have either installed or I have got provisioned or pushed to the backend into the cloud. So as I've just initialized this project, you can see that I've got a status of nothing. But I highly recommend using status, because you can get confused about what you've got developing locally and what you've actually pushed into the cloud. So status is a great way of getting around that. So the next thing I need to do, I need to install some libraries. So as is React, so I've got Node, so I'm going to install 2 libraries. So I'm going to install AWS Amplify, so it's the core sort of libraries. And I'm also going to install the modular React library. So it's AWS Amplify /UI React. So what this will do, this will bring down my UI components that I mentioned earlier for React. So I'll install that, and that'll take, depending on the speed of the internets today, that'll take a bit. But what I will do is I will just take you through, while it's downloading, things you can actually do in Cloud9 if you haven't used it before. So what I use it for quite a lot is for debugging lambdas. So I can actually, this is a list of functions and remote functions that I've got in my account. So I can actually debug these and run them directly from this IDE. Here's the little debug window that comes up. So I find that really handy, and not many people know about it. So I thought I'd share. You can also have chats, so you can set up chats with your fellow developers and get that all running. So there's little things in Cloud9 that not many people are aware of. So I always like to share it when I've got the opportunity. So that's the packages downloaded. Boom. So the next thing we want to do is change our little app. So if you haven't used React before, it's fairly simple. So we have an entry point, and it comes into app.js. So app.js is what is the component or the function that is running at the minute. So I am going to quickly change that just a little bit, just to make sure that we have everything configured correctly. So if I go there, you will see I'm just going to, I think I'll leave it like that, actually. I already changed it. So you can see React working, you can see everything is fine. So I'll just leave that there, actually. So the next thing I'm going to do, now that I've added Amplify, is going to add my authentication component. So what's that going to look like? It's going to look a little bit like this, where we've got a username and we've got a password. So the way we do that is we go, it's pretty simple. So we go Amplify, add auth. So that what that does is then prompts us with more CLI options. So for this one, I'm going to go default config, which is what I'm going to use. I'm going to go username. And select, can I go into advanced? No, for this one, I'm going to keep it as simple as possible because this is really, we're just getting started. So no, I'm done. So that what that'll do, that will generate some cloud information that I can now push into cloud. So I do that by doing Amplify push. So what it's going to do is it's going to create some cloud formation, which is here. So this is some cloud formation which is going to provision. There's always a prompt, so I go yes. Cloud formation that will provision Cognito. So it will provision a Cognito user pool, and it will bring, once it's provisioned, it will bring the settings for the Cognito user pool back into my application, so I can then use it. For those of you who haven't used Cognito before, it's an identity provider. You can federate into different identity providers like Google, like Active Directory, but it can also hold its own identity pools, which are called user pools. So that's what I'm going to use today. I'm just going to create my own user pool to hold my user information that I'm going to authenticate against. So while that is going, I'm going to just also show you, I've got some links here. I wanted to show you more around the documentation for Amplify because it's also pretty cool. So this is the documentation for Amplify, and it shows you how to start using these pre-built components that we're using today. So if you notice, this is basically the steps. And also, I forgot the other JavaScript frameworks earlier, so Vue, Angular, as well as React Native, so also supported and also well documented. So again, the documentation, I'll take you through all the steps that you need to do, and also it'll take you through steps for the other categories that you can use with Amplify, and has nice little guides, also how to use the CLI. So the documentation is a nice place to start with Amplify. There's also a really great community for Amplify. As everything is open source and in GitHub, what we have is a great community, not only on GitHub but in Discord as well, which supports the community. So get involved in that if you're really keen to get involved in Amplify and join Discord, and that's a really cool place to start. So let's see how we're going. So we're still provisioning our backend. I wanted to show you some other stuff. Oh yes, so Cognito. So I talked about Cognito. So this is what we're provisioning as our user pool. So there's a number of different Cognito identities and ways to get started with Cognito. A lot of customers that I talk to are thinking about Cognito. You just have, there's almost a common language that people use when they're using Cognito. So it's really key, like user pool and identity pool. It's cool to get your handle on that, and you can do that in here in the Cognito documentation as well. So that's that, and that's that. So we're still just finishing off provisioning. So any questions in the chat, just push them through. Just anything really about Amplify, I'm happy to answer. So that's it all provisioned. So what's it done? So what we've done now is we have provisioned our Cognito user pool, and we know where that is. So if we open up AWS exports, this is a generated file. So this happens when we run a push. And as you can see here, we've got all our secrets for our identity user pool. I won't keep that open for long. This account I'm going to delete anyway once I'm finished. So the next thing I want to do, we've done our back end, let's do our front end. So let's start building what our front end is going to look like. So the first thing we need to do is I'm actually going to add some CSS. So I'll look at that app.css. I'm going to just quickly change the CSS. So I want my UI to look quick, as big as possible in an hour. So I've pre-configured some CSS, and I've also installed Bootstrap as a way of rendering the UI. So I'm just going to quickly replace the default CSS, and I'm also going to start going into the initial UI. So what I'm going to do is I have prepared a bit earlier. So the first thing we need to do is do our imports. So I'll do those first. So if we go to our app.js, I'll just take you through these imports. So I'll get rid of these and replace them with a set of Amplify imports. So what am I doing? So those have not changed, but here I'm just importing Amplify, and I'm importing two of the components, Amplify Authenticator and Amplify Signout. And I'm also importing AWS exports. So that's how we pull in those all the configuration information that I showed you earlier. The next thing you want to do is I just need to configure it. So to use that AWS so I do amplify configure, and I just pass in that file AWS exports, which is just defined above. So what I've done there, I've just configured Amplify, and it's all good. So the next bit is I'm just defining now my header component. So the way React is, it defines components. So your components are your UI components that you can reuse. So I've defined here a header component. And in the header component, I'm just going to call it Notes app as a title. And it's a very, very simple header. And next, I'm going to define my app itself. And that is just going to replace this app here. I'm just going to get rid of this one. And I'm going to replace it with a very simple component. What it has is a constructor. It stores a state. So this is notes. So as a notes app, I'm going to start building and storing a list of notes. So it's an array of notes. We'll fill that method out in a bit, but really the key here is we are wrapping the render component here, so the UI view component, with the Amplify Authenticator. So what this will do is, if I've got an authenticated user, it will change the UI behavior. So if I save that, and we compile, and we check my compilations are correct. Compiling. Taking a long time to compile this time. Let's make sure I have saved everything and the demo gods are being kind to me today. They look like they are. Still thinking, oh, there we go. Okay, yeah, I've forgotten to remove logo because I'm not using it anymore. Awesome. Yep. Amplify works with Kotlin. Yes, Android developer. Yay, go Android. So there we go. So that is it compiled slowly, but it compiled. So now what we've got here is our little UI component. So the first thing I need to do is I need to sign up. So I don't have any users in this pool. So I'm going to sign up, not in all caps, because that would be shouting. Yes, because I have to create them or them. Username, let's try that. Very informative password. Email address is an email address that works because I'm about to do MFA. So that will now create an account. So I will hopefully be emailed that MFA token into my email, and I'll paste it into. Got questions? What? No. So let's have a look at my email. Where's my email? And there's the code. And okay, so there we are. Here is our Notes app. So what I've done, I have rendered a login, so I can sign out now. I can go and log in again. There we go. So that's authentication done. And so nothing else to say there. So what we've done, we've created authentication, we've reused the authentication component, and we're ready to start building out our API. So let's go and, hi Mr. Rambo, let's go and start building out that API. So we have that. Go Amplify status. So Amplify status, we should now see our auth. Yep, and we've got an operation which is no change, which means everything that we've got locally is in the cloud. So next we're going to add that API. Add API. So there's two types of API you can add with Amplify. You can add a REST API or a GraphQL API. I'm going to use a GraphQL API which uses AWS AppSync. So I'm going to select the defaults for that. I'm going to reuse our Cognito user pool. That's why we created it, so we can secure all of our API calls and for all the users. Do I want to configure advanced settings? No, I don't think I do. So I don't. Do you have an annotated GraphQL schema? So this is the case where you already have a GraphQL schema and you want to bring it in. I don't. I'm starting from scratch. So I'll go no. And now this is the boilerplate option. So it will actually build you a boilerplate schema that you can use to start building your own. I'm going to start with the most simple one, which is the single object. So it's a single object. And so that will go there. And then do you want to edit this schema now? So I'm going to edit the schema window now and build out my object model for my application. Yep, or yes, even. So what it does, we've now got a file we're open with our schema. So this is the boilerplate schema. This is a boilerplate schema that says to do. So this is, I'll get rid of that, because we're starting from scratch. The schema we're going to write is for our note. So what defines a type of note? So type is a GraphQL construct. It's an object. So our type's not called note. It's going to be called note. So the note we're going to do is at model. So what is at model? What am I doing here? So within Amplify, we can generate backend services using CLI. At model is telling Amplify that I want to store this note object in DynamoDB. So that's what at model is doing. It's saying my persistence mechanism is DynamoDB. And then what I also want to add is some auth rules. So you can do authorization inside this field, and then you can define a rule. So you can go, let's define a set of rules. And for this one, I'm going to go allow owner, close the bracket, close that. So what do I need? I need an ID. So the notes will have an ID. Each note will have an ID. So in GraphQL syntax, ID with a bang is not null, and it'll have a note. And it makes sense for that to be not null as well, and a string. So I've defined my note, just tidy up. This is my very simple first schema. So I've got a type note, it's persisting in Dynamo, auth applied to it, and the rules are owner. I only allow the owner access, which is the creator. I'm just double checking that everything's good, and I'll save that. So once that's saved, I have a schema. So the next thing I need to do is do the Amplify push. Amplify push. So I'll get prompted. If you want to get rid of that prompt, you can just go -y. This prompt here, you can go Amplify push -y. I'm just doing this for completion. So next thing is, do you want to generate code for your newly created GraphQL? Yes, I do. I want Amplify to do it for me. The type is JavaScript, and I'll just default all of these options. So now what's going to happen is Amplify is going to build me an AppSync API, and it's also going to provision me a DynamoDB table. So this might take time, so I'm just going to jump to explain a bit more about GraphQL, because remember, we're building a GraphQL API. You may not be familiar with GraphQL. So GraphQL is, if you're familiar with REST API, where you set up, for example, if you're doing a blog, so this is the example for a blog, you have resource endpoints, which are /posts, /comments, or /authors. So if you want the author of a particular post, you probably have to go get posts, and then get the comments for particular posts, and then get that author for that comment. So that could be 3 distinct API calls, which could fill up your bandwidth. So what GraphQL does is it allows you to make that same call in one request. So you can write a query that says, get me the author for a particular post, and it will return. Now, why you can do that in GraphQL, in REST as well. Where GraphQL is really effective is it prevents that over and under fetching, because you ask for exactly what you get, whereas the API doesn't become as complex as it would with a RESTful API if you try to implement the same strategy. So we've already showed you what a type looks like. Here's another type called user. But as well as types, we have queries, which is how you retrieve data. Mutations is how you change data, and also subscriptions. So that's how you get notified, how clients get notified if a type has been mutated. So here's some examples of each. The query for get post is getting me a post for a particular ID, which you pass in, and returns the ID and the title. You can create posts the same way as a mutation. This time creating posts with title summit, ID and you'll get back the ID and the title. And then the subscriptions, which is think of it as an observer on mutation that you can register. So when a mutation create post is fired, it will send down the ID and the title. Now you can also define what's in the payload. So you can define for the non-null fields, i.e. the fields that don't have the bang against them, you can define if they are returned or not. So you can really get granular in what's returned back to your client. So this is what we're doing, and this is how we're using it for our notes field. So I've defined the note, and it is non-null ID, and actually it's a non-null string as well. So what we're going to do, AppSync, and what's happening at the minute, is Amplify has created the AppSync backend service, but it's also creating CRUD operations on the note field, which it will store in DynamoDB. I'll show you the backend services once they're created, just to help with the understanding. What happens is the mutations and the queries that are sent from the client are delegated through AppSync into what are called resolvers into DynamoDB. So it's a really easy way of creating and writing and updating data. And what we then have added onto it is the rules, the @auth rule. We've said that uses Cognito, so it knows who the owner of the post is, i.e. who created the post, and only the owner of that post can actually have access. There are a number of different rules and ways you can use rules, but this is the most simplistic, just to give you an idea of how to start thinking about authorization when you're using an authentication provider like Cognito. So that's a brief overview of AppSync. I usually AppSync in GraphQL. I usually don't do it justice. It's a talk in itself, but that's how we're using it for this particular demo. Okay, let's see how we're going. So we have provisioned everything. So now we are ready to start thinking about we've provisioned our backend. Let's think about our front end. So we go back to app.js, and what we need to do now is add the new note. So the ability in the field to add the new note. So that is, we need probably a field and we need a button. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take you through the code the same way I did the last one. So I'm going to do it in chunks, just so you can get a feeling of what's going on. So the first thing I want to do is our imports. So our imports, the things that we've changed now, we have created an API component that we're bringing in. So this gives us access to calls of the API and library functions in the API. And we also have GraphQL operation. So this we'll use to actually call our GraphQL API. We also have a bunch of files that have been created for us. So if you notice here, we've got a new directory structure called GraphQL queries and GraphQL mutations. So that was created automatically for us with using Amplify. So this is where all the CRUD operations for our notes field live. So these have all been generated and we can use them. So that's where the queries are all in that folder. So using list notes, create notes and delete notes. We're still using our authenticator components and we're still using our exports. Our header hasn't changed. We're going to keep that as it is. But what we're going to do is add a bunch of components for our CRUD operations. So the first one is our class for add note. So let's just start that class. Boom. Boom. So what's add note going to do? So add note, simple constructor. It's going to store the note as you're adding it. It's going to handle the change and set the note in state. And then it's going to do not much else actually. Then we also have to render the component for this, or render the UI for this component. So we'll build a render method. And the render method will look like this. So the render method is a simple form. On click, we'll call our add note. It will say add note, and it will go to handle click, which we've defined, which will store the note. So that's our add note component. The next thing we need to do is render a notes list. So as we add notes, we want to see what notes we've added. So this is going to be called a notes list component, which I'm going to build. And this is a very simple component. It's just a list. So what it is a notes list, and it renders simply the list of notes. Yep. And then after that, we've got our app itself. So here we have our app, and we need to bring in those two components that we just mentioned. So we're going to go in component did mount. We're just going to, when this loads, we need to go and grab whatever we have, whatever notes we have currently. So this will call the list notes. So this is what we're doing. So we're going API GraphQL operation and call list notes, and then set the list in the state. So very simple. We'll add a delete note function as well. So the delete note function is pretty simple. It goes, given a note, get the ID, and then call GraphQL operation delete note with the ID, and then set that to null once it returns. That's delete, and then, oh, sorry, these are asynchronous calls, so not returning, it will update the state. And then finally, the add note function itself, which will go create note, and it will push that state change into the state. So then we've got our functions. We now have to call them from the UI. So in the render method, I'm just going to blast this out just for brevity. So what we're doing here, we're defining our add note box and then our add note button. So that's now rendered for us. Let's have a look. Let's see what that's like. So here we have our add note stuff. Seems to have compiled. Yep, so it's compiled. So this is our new UI, and we've hooked it up to our GraphQL operations. So let's go. Oh no, so we've expired. This is annoying. Let me just log back into Cloud9. Got to love timeouts. Any questions? Why did you make your component? Yep, because it's async call inside it. Good question, Flux Quantum. So this uses a lot of React assumptions. So I'm assuming here that you've got a basic understanding of React and sync and async calls and why you'd use them. So if you want to know more about React and stuff like that, there's more. There is tutorials out there that we can use, that you can refer to. I'm just trying to, there's a fine line between this being a React 1 hour and an Amplify 1 hour. So yeah, please bear with me as I try to navigate that fine line. So let's, we're compiling again, we've got it running. Let's see if we can preview a running app. There we go. So there's our Notes app back. So let's go and exercise this app. So I want to create a new app, and let's code add note. Today, add note. Add note. So, and then I can delete the note, and I can delete the note, and that looks like it's working quite well. So that was a lot to take in. So we did a lot there. So we built our API, we surfed it to AppSync, then persisted it. So let's have a look at how that looks in the back end. So if I go to my services, the first thing we did was AppSync. So we've got AppSync. So what AppSync looks like in the UI is this. So this is our application that we created. And what we can do, we can actually see the schema that it's generated for us. So here is all our schemas with all our CRUD operations all defined. You don't have to change that because Amplify is now controlling that. It defines also the data source, so we can have actually look at the DynamoDB table. So this is the DynamoDB table, and we can look at the items. And we've got our item there, which is called note, and the last one left is fun because everything else was deleted. So that's AppSync. Also, things we can do with AppSync. We can, the region is here, but I can enable logging. So I use this a lot for fault finding. We can log to CloudWatch. I can enable WAF, so I can put WAF in front of AppSync for additional security. I can enable X-ray, so X-ray is how we trace calls. So if I have another service calling into AppSync, I can trace the hops using X-ray. And I can also tag it. So I can do that as well as that. I can also monitor, so we get a monitoring dashboard built into AppSync, which we can use. It's still updating. And that's it. So that's the services that were created for us. Okay. So how are we doing for time? 8:45. So we are Stretching for time, but yeah, please stick around. I'll keep going for as long as possible. I've got 15 minutes left officially, but I can talk about this for quite some time. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a search capability. So with Amplify, we have a number of different transformers. Let me talk to you through those actually. I'll take you through these. So these are the transformers you have available to you. So at the minute I've used @model and @auth. We also have a transformer called @searchable. Oops. @searchable. So you can actually provision an Elasticsearch cluster as part of Amplify as well. So obviously this Elasticsearch would be great for doing searches. But in this instance, we're not going to use one. We're going to use the DynamoDB key transformer. So the key transformer is a way we can build out new new indexes within Dynamo. So we can start building what we want to search on. So that's what we're going to do now. So for this, I'm going to add a key to my field called owner. And then the query itself will be called notes by owner, and it will pull back all the queries really fast. So this is how we're going to define that search, and we're going to use it as a secondary index. So let's start doing that. So the first thing I need to do is modify that schema. Let's take that out of the way. I'll be back. So the schema itself, I'm going to, again for brevity, I'm going to the copy pasta thing. So I'll just describe it to you. So model we know about, it hasn't changed, the rules haven't changed, but this is where we define our new index. So we define the field for the index, the query, and the name. And then what we've passed through is the owner. So now we know that every time we create a note, we will have an owner field, which we'll then be able to query in. So it's an easy way to start searching on that owner. So that's our thing. We've got that. So the next thing we need to do is we need to push that up. So let's go back here. It's by force of habit. Always do that. Make sure everything is fine. Yep, so we've got an update. So the API is telling us we've got an update, which is our new schema. So we need to push that up. Amplify, push. Okay, so what that will do, that will, one day I'll do --y. Yes, I want to update the code. Yep, I want to override it. So what we're now doing is creating that secondary index. So if we just have a look at the secondary index itself, I'll just explain that just a little bit more clearly why this is happening. This shouldn't take that long. But this is, so if you're logged in, you know who you are. So you're the owner. So when you create a note as that owner in the owner field, which we've now created, yeah, we are able to query all records that have that owner field, and we can search on the note name. So when we create that new index, and it's ordered by the owner, which is the partition key, and then the actual sort key is the content of the notes. So it was, what was it? Test, dev let's code as an example. There'll be the content of those will be the sort key. And so what you can do as part of that is run one queries, equal we're doing, or begins with, or greater and equal than. So that's a really nice way of quickly doing quite a complex search over your data using Amplify and DynamoDB. So it's that @key transformer is very, very powerful. There's a number of great talks on access patterns for between AppSync and DynamoDB. So check those out for more information and more examples of using the key transformer. There's also a good, if you can catch it, there is Rick Houlihan has a Twitch channel, and he also has a YouTube. And in one of those talks, he sits down with Nadir Debit, who is the Amplify, one of the Amplify developer advocates, and they go on quite a great discussion on access patterns and how to use the app key transformer. So check that out as well. That will be on Twitch and YouTube. Cool. So it's still creating my secondary index. So we'll just go back to the actual documentation itself. So if I was getting started with Amplify, where would I go? So I'd always come here, and a lot of customers are talking about data store at the minute. So this is a more advanced part of Amplify. So what data store does, it actually adds an offline capability to what we're building. So if you are building an application, say a notes application like I am now, and you have the requirement in your backlog that it has to be offline, then you can build that using data store, and it will actually sync the data once the client is reconnected, and that's all built in. So data store is one of the more sophisticated components that we have. So yeah, it's worth checking out. So I've just clicked on data store, and now it sends me through to the getting started. So I'm using JavaScript. It tells me how to set it up. It links me to some of Nadir's videos, which is really handy, and it takes step by step, takes me through how to start up and build data store. So this is a cool way of getting started. So all I did there was just click through from the main Amplify UI AWS page straight into the Amplify documentation. I also mentioned the community, so there's a community link here. So if you click in the community link in the Amplify documentation, you also say what's coming up. So there is a Twitch show called Amplify with Friends, which is every week. It's well worth checking out. It's not really friendly to this time zone, but you can check out the recordings on Twitch as well. So this will list all the upcoming talks on Amplify as well. So that's the community page. Okay, so now we've created our secondary index. Everything is good there. And now, yep, we have to modify the front end. You see the pattern emerging. So what do we have to add for our front end? So the first thing we need to do, we have an additional query that has been created, and it's called, well, we can have a look. What's it called? GraphQL queries, reload. It's called notes by owner. So that is the query. There's this actual name there, so I'm going to copy that in. So notes by owner. Oops. Yep. So notes by owner is what we're going to pull in. So that will now use our index that we've created. And then we need to add a search note. So I'm going to just add the search note action. Method, I'll probably stick it here. It's the notes list. Let's stick it in the main component. Yep. Makes sense because we've got add, we've got delete. Let's put search in here as well. So our search note method is a bit more complex. I'll do a quick run through. So what it does, it goes note, then it goes result. It also goes, give me the note. If it's not null, then it sets a state. And then goes, okay, if the owner username, if the note for the items in the note, iterate through them, and if it finds a match for the inputted text, then add it to the search results. So I noticed I had a compile error there. So that distracted me a little. bit. Auth's not defined. Oh, I didn't pull it in, did I? So the other thing I needed to pull in that I forgot is Amplify auth, because obviously this command, this search command, we need to authorize it as well. So push it through like that. So now I've imported auth as well. So that's now compiled. And let's give it a test. So no, it's not rendering. So what else did I forget? I forgot to actually put it into the render. So the render itself, it's gonna add into the render. Oh, what am I missing? I'm missing. Yes, I'm missing how to render it, which is okay. Yep. So if I add it in, what have we called it? I haven't defined a search node, have I? I need to do that. I have defined that method, and what I need to do is push in this search node. Yeah. Then, sorry folks, caffeine is wearing thin. So that should pull it in, and I haven't defined the actual search node component, so I'll pull that in quickly. So the search node component itself is just a field, an execute button, and I'll put it just above the other components. So I'll put it above nodes list. So I'll quick run through this. So again, constructor, what's it doing? And handle click, it's setting the state, and it just is a search field. So there we have some notes. We have fun. So let's add some notes. Help. Need coffee. And then I can search. So let's go for fun. Okay, so I've added search functionality to my application, and I still need coffee. So thanks, Fear Devil. So now I've added search to our application. The last thing we're going to add is the AI component. So the AI component is what we're going to do to actually do sentiment analysis on our items. So sentiment analysis is, if you haven't heard of it before, it's like if a piece of text is a positive sentiment, it will annotate it like that. And if it's negative, it will annotate it. And what we're going to use for that is Amazon Comprehend. So Comprehend has this function where it can take in a piece of text, and we can get sentiment analysis from it. So let's go and quickly add it. This will be very fast. So Amplify, add, and predictions. So that's the category that stores all of our AI stuff. So if we use it, the type we're going to add is interpret. You can also do convert. There's lots of stuff and lots of AI actions we can do. As predictions. If you want to know more, I've got videos on my YouTube channel all around adding stuff like image recognition and stuff like that as predictions, but this one is just going to be interpret text. So you're going to go like that, go like that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add it as a basic interpretation. So it's going to be sentiment. Authenticated users only, and that will start building out the CloudFormation template that we're going to push. So let's push it up. Oh, before we do that, actually, I'm just thinking through this. I need to change my schema to store the sentiment. So the only thing I need to do here is add sentiment. So there's a number of ways I could have did this. So I could have created or generated the sentiment when I persisted the note. So that would be a server-side action. But for this demo, I'm just going to do it the old-fashioned way and generate the sentiment from the client. It's 2 API calls, but it's just for demo purposes. So just to make that clear. So the same, I've got everything the same. I just added the extra field, which is nullable, and then I can push it up. So that is now building out comprehend. Well, it will once I press yes. Building out comprehend and generate the graph, and I want it to overwrite. So what this is doing is, so while that's happening, I might see if I can quickly build the front end so we can save some time here. So what I need to do now is I need to start importing another thing. So the thing I need to import is predictions. So the predictions category, so we can start using it. I'm going to do it here actually. As well as predictions, I need to pull in a pluggable. So a plugin for Amplify. It gives me access to a lot of methods and functions to make my life easier when calling the predictions category. The next one is we're going to modify the add note method. Delete add note. So we're going to modify this slightly to call predictions. So if I just remove this stuff. So the add note is now going to go predictions interpret given the inputted note. It's going to say I want a sentiment analysis on that, and it's going to store the return sentiment in the state. So that's the UI. I also probably need notes list. So I'm also going to change the render. So if I go to the notes list component, I'm going to after the trash button. So yep, I'm going to add a simple badge, which is going to give me the predictions category. So that's the UI. And that is there. So we're still provisioning. Any questions on the chat? We're running a bit over time, but that's fine. I think we're only a couple of minutes away. So for getting started with Amplify, as well as the documentation, you can check out my YouTube channel. It's got a number of good videos on how to get started, and also more of the in-depth features on Amplify. There's a number of workshops that are available with Amplify as well. That are you just search for them on Google, and you can again work at your own pace with Amplify to get started. The other thing I wanted to mention is the rest of the transformers. So this is the real power we've seen with Amplify, is you can, with literally a couple of lines, you can do very powerful stuff. So we've used that model. What we haven't used is @connection. So @connection is a way to model relationships. So if we have a number of types, in this one we only had notes type, but we have had a number of different types. We can model what those relationships look like between the types using the @connection transformer. @auth we've talked about. @searchable I've mentioned. @version allows you to start versioning your schema, so you can apply different versions against types. The @function allows you to build a Lambda function, which is cool. And then @predictions. So I mentioned earlier that we could have implemented this with a server call to the predictions using the predictions category rather than the client call that we're using. So you do that using the @predictions transformer. So transformers are cool, and check them out. So let's see. Oh, we're done. So hopefully now I got predictions and So what I've done, I have stuffed up my imports because I have put my plugin definition after an import, before an import. So let's save that. Compiled. So I can now new note. So that's add a note gone. Happy. Yay! So I've got happy with the positive sentiment, and I love coding. Positive, and what else? Copy time. Cool. So that's it. Thanks for sticking around. It went a little bit over time, but we got a working application in the end. It took an hour. So what have we done in an hour? We've added authentication, authorization, API, persistence mechanism, and an AI attribute to our code, which is awesome in an hour. This usually I would take a week, a full sprint to do this. Thanks again for watching. My name is Derek. I'm a developer advocate at AWS. Ping me on Twitter, LinkedIn, check out my YouTube channel, connect. I love talking about Amplify and happy to answer any questions. But yeah, have a good day, and I will end it there with my goodbye slide. So thank you. Bye.